All right, what's up, everyone? Hopefully, you're all doing amazing today. Let's get ready and get this broadcast started. I'm going to start sharing my screen to show coin market cap. Then we'll go look at what stocks look like, and then we'll take a look at crypto. If you can't see my screen in about 5 seconds, just comment and let me know to make sure I'm not just sharing nothing, which is terrible because I'll go through the whole broadcast and have no idea. All right, we are sharing officially. So just taking a look at the market, it's actually been, we've had the most movement we've had in a long time in the last few days. So it's been a pretty good little uptrend we've had. Let me close Discord or that little Discord noise will happen the entire time. But basically, when we look at crypto, Bitcoin in the last 7 days is about 14% up. The crypto fear and greed index, if you remember from my last broadcast, was somewhere over here. Now it's right back to 72. So we're getting right back to greed. Extreme greed is when we're down here. When we start getting in that zone, that's when like Coinbase is the number one trending app in the app marketplace and stuff. And that's when it's time to start thinking about getting out of the market. But right now, one of the things that hurt us today was the CPI index came back and it was bearish. So the numbers essentially nuked the stock market and it nuked the crypto market this morning. Now, crypto is trying to recover, but it's not really, it's too hard to tell what it's doing right now. So it's kind of just a wait and see game. But with that being said, the last 7 days, we've had Bitcoin up 14%, ETH up 10%. ETH still underperforming. So Bitcoin's kind of like the better asset, quote unquote, right now. Solana up 15%. A lot of things moving quite well. Just basically the coins that have been moving well are moving well. So we've got Solana, we've got AVAX. Chainlink had a big move and then it's kind of stalled out now. We've also got Bitcoin Cash, kind of a derivative. Cosmos Atom is actually starting to move really well. IMX has been crushing it. It's just been on a tear. We've had Optimism up, so it's been decent. Near, we've had Injective starting to make a move after a couple months of consolidation. Injective might be ready for its next leg if Bitcoin will allow it. Stacks just going absolutely ballistic. One interesting thing to think about is Stacks typically correlates with Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin starts moving, you can almost bet that Stacks will move too. So it's a pretty good proxy to pay attention to. But just looking at like the top 50, we've got IMX and Stacks really the top performer right now. Caspa is doing well too. Overall, though, everything up quite well. It's been a pretty good 7 days considering the last few essays starting to move back up. Considering the last few months, we've basically done nothing. It was nice to see some real price action. Beam's kind of like the silent killer. Nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to care about it, but it's been like the hottest performing coin of like the entire quote unquote bull run we've had so far. But when we look at the performing ecosystems right now, it's similar. It's DePIN. It's always been top. One of the things that I like in this market are it's kind of like data storage. So computer's been one of the top ones, but you've got Filecoin. I really like Render a lot. eGold, we bought this in dudes at like $30 or something. Just a lot of these sort of data coins. There's one in here that I got at 9 cents that I think has a lot. Tau, we bought this at dudes at like 300, 289 or something, but this has been on a tear. The other one that I like quite a bit that's been performing well up here was Aleph, however you pronounce it. But man, I got this thing at 9 cents and it just went nuts. So just some stuff to look out for. DePIN's been a pretty good industry to be paying attention to. Gaming, ERC 404 is kind of like the flavor of the week right now. Solana, Bitcoin, Ordinal, stuff like that have been doing pretty well too. So something to pay attention to. But with Immutable X, interesting thing here is if you pay attention, as soon as Immutable X starts going nuts, you can almost guarantee the rest of gaming is going to go nuts. So Immutable X goes crazy. Beam starts going crazy, 61% up. So then you can kind of start looking at, okay, what else is doing well over here? Illuvium starting to move finally. Got Heroes of Mavi 160% up. So a lot of these gaming coins start to pump as the larger gaming ecosystems start to move. So you can come down here and kind of find what's a strong performer and what maybe hasn't had its full potential released yet and start to hunt and find really something that might have some potential. Solana, they just had the Jupe launch, so that probably was one of the catalysts to Solana doing quite well. We've got Helium up, we've got Pyth, which has been on a tear. I think I got into this in dudes in like at like 35 or 6 cents. Got Bonk that's doing quite well. So a lot of the Solana ecosystem coins, Dog with hats just going nuts again, 88% up. The hat's back on. Overall, though, it's been a pretty good week or so. We got WEN up 111%. So you can honestly see things starting to really move quite well. But let's go back in and let's see what the market looks like. Let me see if there's any questions. Just be sure to drop those below and I'll check periodically to answer them. Let's see. SWE, Beam, Say. Yeah, we'll go through all those. SWE's just killing it. Beam's killing it. Say's killing it. All three really good coins. Let's go through TradingView and just get a lay of the land. And make sure if you're watching this, go ahead and like this broadcast and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you like it, it tells YouTube that I'm worth listening to and paying attention to. So if you can, go ahead and give that a like. If you're on Twitter, go check my Twitter and retweet the broadcast that I tweeted out. Outside of that, let's take a look at what's going on with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin dominance just started going nuts. We hit that 54% wall and then just plummeted right back down, but it's quickly regaining ground, showing us that Bitcoin is still the primary driver in this leg. So Bitcoin's been leading. Bitcoin got crushed down here for a minute, but then Bitcoin's coming right back up. ETH BTC, similar story. We kind of bottomed out and had some nice God candles and then came back down, but we've had a nice wick. What's important to look at here is where BTC's at though. So inside the Dudes server, I told everyone that we were looking at breaking out of a range. And so we broke out of the range, and the range was like right here. So in the server, I said that we were going to, what would happen, and this is kind of how it played out, but we were going to come through, we were going to have this, let me find where it happened. I said we probably have a pretty good dump, and then what would happen is we'd come back up and we'd bounce off of this EMA 200, which we bounced quite well off of it, which put us right into this downtrend that I drew. And then I said what would happen was we'd either come through and reject and fall straight through and go down, or we'd drive and we'd bounce off of it and start an up drive. And ultimately what happened was we kind of bounced through it, and then we waited around for a while. It was actually took forever. It was days, but my entry for a long was somewhere around like right here, I think, on the breakout. So we entered on the breakout, and then we kind of just rode it. We set in there, like we set in this long from February 1st till February 7th until it finally took off. But it ended up being a pretty good long because it took us from like 42.6 up to the peak at like 50,000. So it was a pretty good drive. It was like when I called 26,000, we rode that up to like 36. But what's going on now is we had a nice clean break of the trend. So we had this, you can actually see it pretty well when it's drawn on fib zones. Basically, since about December 3rd, we've been kind of straddling this fib zone right here. We haven't been able to do much. We always come right back to it. Came back. It's like a magnet. We were just stuck on it. But now what's happened is we finally broke through the next fib zone, which was exciting because it put us on this trajectory for this next leg. And when we look at what happened was we broke out, we didn't retest the 4-hour trend at all. And then we retested it here, and that sent us straight back up to this 50,000 zone. Now we came back down. This morning is when the dump happened because the CPI numbers came in 8:30 a.m. Eastern, dumped crypto, dumped stock market. But what's good about this point right here is we have what could be a reasonable reset on the 4-hour RSI. I would have preferred it to be down here on the 50, like a little more of a dump and then a reset. But the other good news is we had a reset off this 4-hour trend. So it's like the EMA 13 and EMA 21. So based off that, we had I thought it was going to bleed through at first. It wasn't looking super strong. And then all of a sudden we had a decent bounce and we're having some follow through. So now what's going to happen? And one of the things I said inside the Dudes server is right now I just kind of want to observe what happens next, because what could happen is we could come back up and reject and then push back down, and it probably leads us to somewhere around 47K. If we look at the 1 hour, if we reject off this, it probably puts us back down right here, somewhere around 48,320. And so then we create a range. We have up here, we have up here. The other thing we want to pay attention to if those don't hold, which so far it's not bad. And if you can see this line I drew, this is one of the Fibonacci extension lines that I drew out. And what happened here was we actually hit that, which coincided with the 4-hour trend, and we bounced off. And we've got a pretty decent sweep going on right now. What we need to see, though, is we need to clear this zone, because this is a there's a lot of chop here. Like 50K is a pretty nasty zone. It's going to be a grind. So ultimately, though, if overall everything fails, we come back down to the daily 46,201 to about 45,029, which should produce a pretty decent bounce for us and provide for a new range. So then our new range would be 50,000, be like 4561 to like 50,000. And we range there for a while. And what I would imagine would happen is this fib zone, if we can actually close above it and create a good consistency pattern, at least above it, we'd probably have this as a magnet. We'd go up, down, up. We just stay close to this line, and this line would become the magnet, like this line was the magnet before. When we look at the zone we're in, it's the 0.618. So this is kind of the golden fib pocket. If we can hold above this and clear this, what happens is it basically slingshots us or puts us in a pretty good position to go to the next zone. Typically, when you clear this golden fib pocket, it's clear, it's come back, retest, and then it's launch. And that moves us up to like 57,649, potentially even up to the 69,000 zone. So it puts us near all-time, actually above all-time highs, or actually matching all-time highs, because that's where I drew it out. So that's kind of where that would put us. I would imagine we clear just above it, and then that would be probably pretty big correction that would happen at that point, just because we're clearing a pretty significant milestone. So something like would be like bounce, drive, could reject all the way back down, push through, maybe reject back down, push through. So something like that could potentially happen, but we'll see how price plays out. Doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. Like I said, this 50K zone's there's a lot of grind in it. So if we kind of look at let's take a look at the order zones. So if you can see, this is all red. So that means like 47,822 up to like this 53,861 is a pretty nasty zone. If we come to the 4-hour, we can see that there is some demand. There's a little demand zone down here in the 46 zone. So like I said, 46, 47,000 area, but we've still got this nasty chop zone to get through that might prove to be a little bit challenging. Who knows? But we'll see how it plays out. We'll see what happens as we kind of progress through. But ultimately, that's the pathway for Bitcoin. ETH is in a similar situation. ETH is actually sitting inside of a pretty nasty pocket. So ETH needs to, based on what I drew on ETH, we essentially were stuck. And if you look at ETH in comparison to Bitcoin, it hasn't even really moved yet. So that's what's interesting about ETH. We're still kind of in the dump zone. We're still straddling this lowest level of this fib zone. And so with ETH, we were straddled and we just could not figure out how to get through this. But now we've essentially pushed through it, it's propelling us. We're kind of at this zone. So now for ETH, what ideally we do is we push through this zone, which puts us here, retest and push into this big demand zone here, or this big zone with a giant sell wall. But ultimately, what I would like to see for ETH is for us to get through this fib pocket here and push into like the 4,000 zone, because there's a lot of sells here that we have to pay attention to, but ultimately this puts ETH where we need it to be in comparison to where Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin's like up here in this zone. We need ETH to push into this zone, and then ETH has the potential to run to infinity and beyond. So that's ultimately where I'm looking at with that. In terms of where they're looking at right now, short term, what I'm looking at is on the daily. Basically, what we're looking at here is we had a pretty clean invalidation off all of these like bear divs and stuff like that. The dailies pushed through. When we look at the weekly on Bitcoin, we had a beautiful, I said this on stream a few weeks ago, maybe a month, probably a few weeks ago, but we had that bounce off the 3-day RSI, and that was a beautiful bounce, and that's what essentially precipitated this entire launch. So we came through, we bounced, and then that drove us all the way up. And what that essentially did was we had some bear divs kind of created, but that ultimately is starting to invalidate these divs as this 3-day starts to close out. So it looks pretty good on the weekly. What I would like to see monthly, just doing what the monthly does. The monthly can stay up here for the entire, or the weekly can stay up there for quite a while. Monthly looks good still. So everything ultimately doesn't look bad. We're clearing a lot of zones. We're just got some chop that we're trying to see essentially which direction and how fast we get through this. So when we look at the daily, still looks decent. When we come down to the lower time frames, that's where it gets a little more iffy. So good news is on the 4-hour, we've essentially bounced off the 4-hour trend, which is good. We kind of, well, like I said, we've created this reset, would have preferred it on the 50, but the fact that we're clearing that 4-hour zone is good. When we look at the 1 hour, the fact that we've actually been able to clear the 1 hour is good. If all the this is the problem though, there's not a lot of strength here, and it's 3:28 my time. So typically we don't see any sort of decisive action until the US stock market opens now. So we probably can't expect any sort of major movement patterns until the US stock market opens tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. Eastern. But for now, if all we do is just hold above this and just sit sideways, then that's fine. As long as we don't sit here and start losing the 4 hour trend or the 1 hour trend, we start losing that. And then all of a sudden we start visiting this zone again. We start double bottoming, and it's just a nasty 24 hours. It would be ideal if we could just come up here, even lose it, come back through and just stay sideways until the market opens tomorrow and the actual decisions are made as to where it's at. Same thing with ETH. We're just sitting above it. And if you look where these big candles came from, we had it like 12 o'clock my time, which is power hour before the US stock market closes. And then we had the other big candle was 8, about 6 a.m. right after the bearish dump. So looking at that, we're sitting in the same zone. We're back above the 1 hour trend on ETH. We're back above the 4 hour trend. So both those are pretty decent. I mean, ETH looks good. 4 hour, it's had that nice reset, like I talked about with Bitcoin. With the daily, it looks fine. When we look at the 3-day, it had a bounce back here, which led to the drive that it's currently on. So ultimately, ETH isn't looking horrible. Looking at the AO, it's back to being positive, so it's not bad. It was on a downtrend. Now it's starting to push back up. So 3-day looks pretty good. Overall, not bad price action here. ETH, people keep talking about the bearish divergence here, which would be this. But what's happening with this, if ETH pushes just a little bit, it invalidates this whole divergence. So we need to wait till this closes out, and this doesn't close out till 5 days for this weekly. Outside of that, let's look at some of the big coins that we're paying attention to. So let's take a look at Sol first. Everybody always asks about Sol. Where's Sol at? What's Sol doing? So Sol basically, one thing area I was watching was this 105 zone, and it's been able to push through it. Essentially got rejected, and then pushed above, and then pushed, and then closed the weekly way above. So now we're up here in this 112 zone. So Sol has basically has turned this into support as long as Bitcoin doesn't die and fall apart. Sol on the weekly, we're hoping there's nothing majorly wrong with it. When we look at the 3-day, it almost has a nice reset. It would have been nicer if this was on the 50. It would give me more confidence on Sol. But if Bitcoin keeps driving, it seems like Sol is coming back, and Sol wants to suck the liquidity out of the market. So interestingly, with Sol, this cycle, Sol reminds me of ETH last cycle, where ETH just went nuts. And then TIA reminds me of Sol, of how Sol was moving. And so it's kind of interesting how things are pushing along. But let me see if there's any questions. I know there's a couple of coins. Did you catch any of BGLC? I don't think so. I'll take a look at it though. Let's see. Let's take a look at some of these. We'll start off with SWI, Beam, and Say. I have both SWI and Say on my portfolio list. Both those look really good. Say. So one thing I caught Say, I had a bid down here I forgot about, and I caught a bid at 15.59, which was incredible. So that put me in a pretty good position for this coin. I completely forgot I didn't even remember I had the order in, or I would have posted in Dudes about it. So everyone could have caught the bid. But ultimately, when you look at Say, it has a decent reset, starting to look bullish again, looking like it wants to start initiating this drive. So it looks pretty good on the 3-day. Would have liked this to be at 50, but ultimately it's starting to drive strength from this and starting to produce some bullish momentum from it. So it looks good on the 3-day. Same thing on the weekly, has a decent little reset here. When we look at the daily looks good. It's finally starting to clear it. So we cleared above this 50 RSI. We were able to confirm and bounce off of it. And now we're sitting above this little point of resistance here. So if we can hold above this on the daily, candle closes in 27 minutes, and the next day can close just above that, then I think we're in a pretty good zone. Say is probably a pretty solid long. Looking at here, the daily starting to flip positive on the AO. So all signs point to a lot of strength coming back to Say. So I think it looks pretty good. If I was going to long this, I'd probably look for a continuation pattern off 4 hour. So when we look at when this was initiated, we lost it here. We were able to push back through, kind of bounced off here. I probably anticipate more, especially with this resistance line here. I'd probably anticipate riding this a little bit until the 4 hour catches up. So one thing I would probably be looking for is if it holds this 4 hour trend, that's where I would be looking to catch a bid for this coin. So that's right now it's like 0.784 to about 0.7241. So if it holds that, then I'd probably be looking to catch a bid right there. When we look at SWE, let's find it. It's in here somewhere. I thought I had it in here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay. So when we look at SWE, it looks great. I mean, the coin's strong right now. When we look at the 4 hours, it's kind of choppy. It's been pretty choppy lately. Essentially, from the 154, it had a decent push. Then it lost the 4 hour, bounced off the 4 hour, bounced off it again. Now it's trying to push again. So it's hard to tell what it wants to do at this point, but the strength is pointing to probably more upside because we had this bounce off the hourly and it led to kind of a reinitiation of that drive. So it looks good there. When we look at the 3 day, it's starting to break this little consolidation. So it just had this nasty little like uptick, which was ultimately actually a pretty good trend for it. So from right here, it was just the looks, and now we're starting to really break that zone and starting to pretty clean break. So ultimately, it looks great. Look at the weekly. It looks like it's just about to go parabolic. The thing has just got an immense amount of strength. If I was looking to catch this, I'd probably catch the 4 hour. I don't know if there'll be, it moves so sideways right now and it's volatile. So it's up, straight down, up, straight down. So I would probably look to catch this on the 4 hour. If it's able to push past where it's at, this simple resistance here, I'd probably be looking to bid somewhere around like 18221 to like 17926-ish, probably be where I'd anticipate. If it dies from here, I'd just bid the 4 hour. But if it doesn't and it continues pushing a little, that's probably the zone that I would be looking at for that one. Let's see what else we've got. Beam, man, Beam is dominant and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody's paying attention to it. I don't know why. Beam is just absolutely crushing it. When we look at Beam, man, it's been a good performer. Let's just take a look at the weekly. Like the thing is monstrous. They rebranded from Merit Circle or something, but it had a great break, then had a consolidation pattern, then a break. Basically, what every coin does, it consolidate in this little consolidation trend. So it's drive, consolidate. So it consolidated from December 4th till about January 29th, a couple of months of consolidation, then just a massive break. And so now it's broken out and it's on the upside. When I look at it, there's not enough data on that. Not really enough data here, but that's a great reset. It's a little high, but it went from this downtrending consolidation pattern to a break. When we look at the 1 day, we'll probably get a cleaner picture. 1 day essentially broke out here on the RSI and then used that to push through the consolidation. So now it looks like it's in a pretty good position. It's had it's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 daily candles in a row that have been positive. So I anticipate at least a little bit of sideways movement to let this 4 hour trend catch up. It hasn't actually tested the 4 hour trend. So this would be a beautiful entry. So if this thing starts to, even if it goes up a little and starts going sideways and just moving here, it's going to allow the 4 hour trend to catch up, which probably puts it like right here-ish. And then this one maybe right, like right there. That's what I would bid. So if it comes back in here, obviously it keeps ranging. But when it comes through, because this is so strong, I would probably wait for that and I would bid the 4 hour trend. And then when it hits, when I say bid 4 hour trend, what I would do is I would put orders at the top and I would put orders at the top. And I would have an order here and an order here so I can catch both segments of the bounce. Sometimes these coins are so strong that it will barely touch the top and move through. Case in point over here, it didn't even touch it at all. But the problem was when it finally did, it just fell through and started consolidating for a while. So that's something to pay attention to as well. If this comes up and if I was going to bid this and I caught the bid, then I would want to pay attention to and hope and pray, obviously, that it actually continues. But if it's broken out of this continuation trend, I would anticipate that the 4-hour would actually push it and give it the strength to drive up. But ultimately, pretty good position. I like where it's at. I like what it looks like. It's starting to peel over, but like I said, it's probably going to catch the 4. And that's going to actually, I wasn't even looking at the 4-hour chart. So this is where I would catch the bid. It's up here. When we look at the 4-hour, it's probably going to put it in a position to where it's going to come back down and bounce off the daily. I was looking at the daily. But what I would look at is the RSI bounce off of here is probably what's going to happen to create a clean break. When we look at the consolidation breakout here, let's look at previously. So the first time it started launching back here and it tested that 4-hour trend. Notice how it fell straight through, but then it used that to drive and create the next drive, and then it fell again. Then it used that to create the drive through, and then it put itself into this kind of accumulation pattern. Now that it's broken out again, what I would be looking at, and notice how it tested it's pushed and it tested the 4-hour trend once. And when it tested that 4-hour trend, it launched. And it's probably obviously coincides with when Bitcoin launched. But now what it's doing is coming back through and it's testing this trend again. So if I was going to try to get into this, then I would probably want to bid. I would want to bid somewhere in the zone. I might put a bid like right here and then a bid like right here so I can catch some wicks. And then I would put a stop loss like right. This ideally that's support. Hopefully, hope and price. Then a stop loss goes like right here-ish. And it puts it in a pretty decent zone for a long, maybe even stop loss like right here. So that would be what I would do for that trade. But ultimately, I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks pretty good, especially because the 4-hour trend, it's starting to catch up. So ultimately, it could just keep peeling through till that 4-hour and then light straight up. It'll obviously depend on how well Bitcoin performs too. You could even call this a little bull flag painting. So when it does clear that bull flag, it goes up. Let's see. Check some AI coins. Type AI. Let's see on Uniswap. Okay. Type AI. I don't like the 4-hour. The reason I don't like the 4-hour is because it's in a downtrend. It wouldn't give me a lot of confidence to be able to come back into this. Like as the RSI's fallen below, but it's starting to come through. I would wait for this RSI to test this 50 and bounce and drive through, which will probably coincide with, notice how it's rejected off these EMA bands almost every single time. So I would want it to push, and I would want it to clear and hold above this green on the 4-hour at the minimum. When we look at the daily, what I really don't like about it right now is it's essentially created a massive downtrend. So we've just got this that it's not pretty. The problem with this is it can just keep doing this forever. The things just will stay in these downward trends for a while. So we have to be careful entering this kind of stuff. This is the problem. It just cannot break this. And so because of that, when we're looking at the daily RSI, it's starting to fall below that 50. If it does fall below that 50, we can expect it to continue to the downside. Now, because it's at the bottom of this channel, you can probably anticipate it pushes back up, which coincides with like a revenge push to try to actually reclaim this 50, which is what I would pay attention to, because then you'd hope that it pushes around and drives through. Because it's at the 50, it might have the strength to actually do that and produce it. So that's what I would pay attention to. I wouldn't necessarily want to get in it now. Or if I did, my entry would be like right here and my stop loss would be down here, because because the problem is I could ride it up here, but if it rejects, I'm going to get stopped out anyway down the line. What would be safer ideally is it pushes through and it's able to actually get above these EMA bands, and then you're in a pretty good position because it'll use those to bounce and drive through. Weekly has no data, so I have no idea. But that's kind of that's what I would be looking at for that coin. Let's see. Web AI. All right, Web AI. Zero data. Kind of hard to tell when these coins are brand new. Well, we came straight through. It looks like it wants to come back. Let's look at the 4 hour. Okay, so it looks like it's tired on the 4 hour. It's starting to print some divergences, which isn't the best. What I would anticipate on this is it's going to come back through and test this 4 hour trend to see if there's potential for continuation, which is going to coincide with it bouncing off this RSI on the 50. So ultimately, what I would be looking at is sideways, and then I would look at bounce and continuation, or fall through and die. Let's see, what else do we have? Let me know if you're still watching. If you're still watching and this is valuable, just give me a valuable down below so I know this is helpful. OX Dev. I can't even find it. Is this on? Let me know where this is at. Is this on like Bird's Eye or Dex Tools? TRND. And I'll show you some of my favorite AI coins in a second. But ultimately, this one, we got some bearish divergences on the 4 hour, which isn't the best. Starting to push through, it's going to go back down and test that 50 on the RSI. Same thing, it's going to go back down and test this 4 hour trend. So that's what I would be waiting for. If it can bounce off this, it's a good play. If it falls through, it's probably going to die and fall straight through. So ultimately, nothing major to pay attention to. It looks like the daily tried, but this isn't good. So it's kind of like a swing failure pattern almost. So because of the, notice how it did it here, and then it went down and tested lows. Same thing here. Probably going to come back and sweep the lows. Let's see. BGLC. I did not catch that. Let's see what it looks like. See, is that crypto? Mavia, Jupe, JTO. So some of the coins that I like that are in the AI field, render especially. Let's just go over the list of things that I'm kind of interested in. I think TIA looks incredibly weak right now. TIA is coming back down. It's going to test that daily trend. It's just essentially in a consolidation pattern. Even with Bitcoin strength, it hasn't really shown any strength. So TIA also lost the 4 hour trend. So now it's down. TIA is going to continue consolidating for a little bit of time. It's ultimately lost its 4 hour trend. It's losing the EMA 55, and I think it's going to come back down and test this 4 hour EMA 100, which also coincides with it losing pretty much everything on the 1 hour. So ultimately for TIA, it doesn't look great. I would actually probably look for 18.4 for a bounce, or potentially even 17.35. Injective, I think, is starting to finally break out. It's starting to show some strength. It had a nice drive here, but it's starting to lose that 4 hour trend, which is a little bit concerning on the daily. What I don't like is this 36.797 zone. It got massively rejected off of it, which coincided with bearish news today. So we had a nice daily push, and then we're back down to that 50. So now it either needs to bounce and drive off here, or we're probably going to come back down and start testing like the 33s again. Same thing on the 3 day. It had a clean bounce here, but it needs to clear this zone to be able to actually do anything. Weekly, nothing major. ARB, I think ARB looks pretty good. A lot of the ETH betas look really good. When we look at the 3 day, there's a great bounce off here, which has produced a pretty nice move. As long as Bitcoin does well, I think ARB doesn't even look like it's being. ARB's had a nice bounce off that, beautiful bounce off that 4 hour EMA, and it's now starting to continue this trend. Let's see if it can. ENS is kind of riding. Looks like ENS is going in. It had such a big drive. It's going into like a continuation now. Nothing major. LDO looks great. It's had this bounce off the 50 in the RSI. Now it's starting to push back up, needs to clear this zone, and I think it's in a really good place. Put some buys in for LDO, so I like where it's going. I would like to see above this line, and I think it has blue sky potential. STX just massive, man. STX is just killing it. Just another massive move. The 3 day looks great. It didn't even bounce off the 50. It just bounced off the middle and then started driving again. It's pretty much invalidated every single bearish piece of it. The thing just doesn't stop. It's been absolutely dominating this cycle. If I was going to do a long in this, I'd probably be looking at when this 4 hour trend catches up. Could even be somewhere in this zone. Optimism, another great one. Optimism bounced right off that 4 hour trend, come straight through. When we look at the daily, looks clean, broke through the 50. 3 day, Nice little bounce here, and it's been nothing but up ever since. Could anticipate sweeping a few of the lows, but ultimately it's in a pretty good position. We already looked at Sweet Render. That's one of the AI coins that I like a lot. Render had a decent bounce off the 3-day here, and now it's starting to create a new drive for itself. When we look at the weekly, similar situation, just not off the 50. Daily, clean bounce, looks pretty good. I think Render's one of the top AI coins. I think Maddox weekly looks amazing. Ultimately, it's one of the few coins that's actually had a bounce off the weekly and shown some continuation strength out of that. So I think that puts Matic on a good trajectory to the dollar plus zone. SNX, another great one. Beautiful bounce off the weekly. That's going to put SNX back in a trajectory to get in the $4 plus zone, eventually somewhere into the fives. So ultimately, I think SNX looks beautiful. Just a clean weekly chart. E-Gold's starting to do it too. Finally started to show some life here. It's been consolidating forever. IMX, another one that I think has on a new mission. It didn't really bounce off the 50 or anything. I think the 3-day bounced. Yeah, beautiful bounce here. And then that started it on its next trend. I think this is a good one to maybe even look at for the 4-hour. It's right here. So ultimately, I think we can anticipate a bounce off of this area. And ultimately, that would consistently drive it up. Atom, another one with a really good weekly chart. So it actually bounced through and then pushed straight back up. And it's been nothing but up ever since. Got a little bit of resistance here, but ultimately I think this is going to put Atom on a trajectory to like the 1350 zone. We had Link. Link ultimately had it finally got a renewed drive after being sideways for what felt like forever. It bounced off the 3-day and then went on a mission. Now it's starting to consolidate a little bit again. So something to pay attention to. It's actually losing its 4-hour trend or trying to. It fell through. Now it's pushing through. So if it can push back through, it has strength. If it doesn't, we probably come back down and start considering a failed breakout, or we start testing the top of the previous breakout point. Let's see, AI starting to perform well again. Kind of got stuck here for a while in this little consolidation pattern. Now it's actually cleared its previous highs. So I think AI looks really good. Ultimately, I'd be looking at the 4-hour trend to catch on that one. We actually pushed through on the daily. 3-day, you have no data, so no clue, but the daily looks good. Tau looks really good. We got into this in like this $3 $283 zone. Ultimately, it's starting to get tired. Sitting here in the middle of its just a massive drive. I was thinking it would hit the 657. Let's see. Most of these airdrop coins have been kind of trash, but let's check out JTO. Someone asked for that one. It's starting to show some life. It's definitely not in a place where I would want to buy. It's below the 3-day trend. Looks decent on the daily, starting to push through. If it can hold above this, and if it can push above this, then I think Jupe might be a buy because then we have a nice area and this is going to catch up and we have a good stop loss to set just below this. So that's kind of what I would be looking at for Jupe. The one that I think is actually great is Zeta. So it came out, immediately died, and now it's starting to push up only. Zero data, so no clue on what it does. But what I could anticipate, obviously, is that we're going to come back through. We're starting to peel over. So drive, peel over, test, and does that create another drive? Pyth, another great one. Pyth is already starting to send itself. So Pyth it essentially did the same thing. It bounced off the 4-hour, created a great drive, and now it's on a mission. Pyth doesn't have a ton of data either, but that 3-day is above the 50. It just hasn't stopped. It's been a straight line ever since it's been on this new drive. Ultimately, it broke this and then pushed straight through. So Pyth looks really good. We got Pyth and dudes at like 0.36, I think. But if I was going to rebid this off the 4-hour, I would wait for this to start moving sideways and peel over and then drive so I could catch it. DYM, just nothing really, moving like trash right now. Just kind of have to see how it starts playing out. Losing the 4-hour 50, losing the 4-hour trend. Nothing super great to report about it. JTO. Starting to look pretty good. I mean, it had a clean bounce off the 4-hour here, kind of good retest here. Let's look at the daily. I don't know if it has, oh yeah, daily starting to cross over on the 50, which is really good. I think it's actually finally looking like it wants to break out of this downtrend it's been stuck in, which could coincide with breaking and holding above the 2.17 zone. When we start looking at the 3-day, I think it has enough data now. Yeah, it's starting to try to clear that 3-day trend. If it can actually clear that, I would probably anticipate we come up and test that 50 on the next 3-day. And then ultimately it puts us in a place where we can maybe potentially start actually seeing an uptrend for it. Nothing really on the weekly. But that's where that's at, kind of neutral. Good on the daily, which could transfer over to the 3-day if it can clear this zone. If it can clear this zone, that it puts it up here to start challenging this zone. And then I think it's in a pretty good spot. Ultimately, that's it. Stocks. When we look at SPX, we've been up only. Bad news today. Good news about the bad news is we did dump, but we bounced off the 4-hour trend. So that's decent. Let's look at SPY. It tells the same story. Same thing. We dumped, but then it closed red, but ultimately it had a great bounce off this daily trend. So it used it as support. Usually when it bounces off that, it closes red, it opens up the next day and continues the trend. So we'll see how it does. Now, QQQ, same thing. It was able to bounce off the EMA 21, and now it's just under this one. I would anticipate we open up. It's already above it post. So I would anticipate we have a revenge push. We're not even below the 50 or anything. So, I mean, nothing to worry about yet. I'm not shorting. I don't short stuff off news. We had bad news today. I hate shorting off bad news because sometimes you just get wrecked because it completely turns around the next day. IWM, everything else kind of getting wrecked. On the stock market, Apple's falling, losing its daily trend. Google's losing its daily trend. If these 7 start falling apart, though, then it's bad for the indexes. They'll start falling apart too. Microsoft's had a decent bounce. Meta hasn't even come near it yet. Amazon bounced off quite well. So about half of them. NVIDIA had a great bounce. AMD. ARM starting to lose. Tesla just been absolute trash. PayPal. Everyone always wants to know about Tesla. Biggest thing to know about Tesla is it's been in a downtrend since like July 19th. It's been down ever since. Every other Magnificent Seven has been up. It makes zero sense to me that people love this coin so much and all it does is dump. It's like they keep buying, and all the thing does is dump. All they do is lose. They miss their earnings. They miss their earnings. We dump. When every single one of the other Magnificent Seven have been up only. It doesn't make any sense to take such a massive downside from this coin for so long when every one of these could be up. You could literally take all of these. If you wanted to be really dumb, you could just buy all of these. When these are profitable, sell them and then lose all your money in Tesla. It's just wild to me how popular this coin is. Coinbase, it's actually had a pretty good rebound off of this 114. It's right back above this daily trend. RSI is starting to go back to retest that 50, especially after today. Nice clean break on that 3-day though. That tells me that it might have a little bit of room. The fact that we close like this though is concerning, or if we close like this is concerning, because then we're probably going to come back and test this zone. We look at MicroStrategy, another Bitcoin type coin, absolute monster today. It always moves significantly better than coin. Coin is kind of just a lackluster performer in comparison to MicroStrategy. Even Marathon, Riot too, all of these doing well in comparison to coin. Hood, another coin or a Bitcoin type thing because they hold so much. Had decent earnings today. They crushed everything in a good zone. Hood's above a lot of these buy zones. So 3 days actually crossing over. If this confirms, that's probably actually it's really a really good confirmation that Hood is going to go on another run. The last thing we'll look at are the BTC ETFs. So I posted in Dudes that I was going to grab this. I grabbed somewhere in the 27s-ish. One thing, there's not really enough data to really make any sort of inferences or decisions, but if Bitcoin's going to go up, it's going to go up. It's kind of how you have to look at it right now. The daily trend is here. Probably anticipate, a retest of the 4-hour coming up soon. But yeah, we retested it today. So dump straight through, retest, bounce. So we'll see if that holds. If not, then it starts to down. Then it's going to go boop, boop, boop until we get to the 50. So which means that this will essentially maybe come here and then come back and then just get choppy. So that's pretty much it. Let me know if there's any questions in the chat, but that's all I've got for today. Hope y'all have a great day. If you're still watching this and you found value in this, go on Twitter and retweet my tweet that said I was doing the broadcast and tell me what you liked about it and how this was helpful. And if you're in the Dude server, go in there and let me know that you liked the broadcast. But that's it. I will talk to you all later.